The smell hit me before I even opened the front door, acrid smoke mixed with melted plastic and something else I couldn't identify. My hands trembled as I fumbled with my keys, the surgical bandages on my abdomen pulling tight with each movement. 3 days in the hospital recovering from emergency gallbladder surgery, and this is what I came home to. Marcus? I called out, stepping into what used to be our living room. The silence that greeted me was somehow worse than the smell. Through the sliding glass doors, I could see the smoldering remains of what had once been my life scattered across our backyard like the aftermath of a tornado. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you, my grandmother's antique jewelry box, the one passed down through 4 generations, lay twisted and blackened among the ashes. The oil paintings I'd collected during my travels through Europe, each one carefully selected and lovingly framed, were nothing but charred canvas and melted frames. My books, hundreds of them, accumulated over 30 years of voracious reading. Reduced to papery ash that danced in the autumn breeze. I sank onto the couch, the only piece of furniture that seemed untouched, and pulled out my phone with shaking fingers. The text message from Marcus was timestamped yesterday at 2:47 p.m., exactly when I was lying unconscious in post-operative recovery. Spring cleaning while you're gone. Time for a fresh start. Some things needed to go. See you when you get home. Some things needed to go. As if my entire life's collection of memories and treasures was just clutter to be discarded. I scrolled through my phone, finding more messages I'd missed while sedated and recovering. Bonfire tonight. Getting rid of old junk. This one included a photo that made my blood run cold, Marcus grinning beside a roaring fire, my wedding dress clearly visible among the flames. The dress my mother had sewn by hand, the one I'd planned to pass down to the daughter I'd never had but had always hoped for. The sliding door opened behind me. "Oh good, you're home early," Marcus said, his voice carrying that casual tone he used when he thought he was being clever. "I wasn't sure when they'd discharge you." I turned slowly, taking in his appearance. His usually pristine business attire was stained with soot, his expensive shoes caked with ash. But it was his expression that told me everything, not guilt. Not remorse, but barely concealed satisfaction. "What did you do?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. "I cleaned house," he said, settling into his leather recliner like he'd just completed a routine chore. "You've been hoarding that junk for years, Elena. We needed the space." Hoarding. The word hit me like a physical blow. Every item he destroyed had meaning, history, value, not monetary, but emotional. The handwritten letters from my late father. The pottery I'd made in art class. The photo albums documenting 38 years of my life before Marcus. "My grandmother's jewelry," I said, the words catching in my throat. "The pearls she wore on her wedding day." Marcus shrugged, reaching for the remote. "Old costume stuff. Probably worthless. Besides, I got you that diamond tennis bracelet for Christmas. Much more your style now." Now. As if I was some project he'd been working on, molding me into his vision of an acceptable wife. I thought about all the times he'd made subtle comments. About my clutter, my old-fashioned taste, my tendency to hold on to things with sentimental value. "You had no right," I said, standing despite the pulling sensation in my abdomen. "I had every right," Marcus replied, not even looking at me as he flipped through channels. "This is my house too. And frankly, Elena, it was embarrassing." What would people think if they saw all that accumulation? People. Always about what people would think. Marcus lived his entire life as a performance, every decision calculated for maximum social and professional impact. He was the senior vice president of strategic development at Blackwood Financial, one of the city's most prestigious investment firms. His image was everything. "My wedding dress," I said, my voice gaining strength. "You burned my wedding dress? That old thing? Elena, we've been married for 8 years. It's not like you were going to wear it again." He paused on a financial news channel, his attention already shifting to stock prices and market analysis. Besides, the fire department was surprisingly efficient. Hardly any smoke damage to the house. The fire department. He'd called them, which meant neighbors had seen the blaze. Had probably asked questions. The humiliation would be complete by Now, Elena Morrison, the woman whose husband burned all her belongings while she was in the hospital. I walked slowly toward the sliding door, each step sending sharp pains through my healing incision. Outside, the devastation was even worse than I'd initially seen. Not just my personal belongings, but pieces of furniture, artwork, even clothes from my closet. My entire identity, reduced to ash and scattered across the patio like confetti at some twisted celebration. "I suppose you'll want to clean this up," Marcus called from inside. The HOA sent a complaint letter. Apparently, some of the neighbors found the smoke disturbing. I turned back to look at him through the glass. This man I'd married 8 years ago in a ceremony that now felt like it had happened to someone else. Marcus Blackwood Morrison. He'd legally added my family name to his when we married, claiming it showed his commitment to equality. I'd thought it romantic at the time. Now I realized it was just another calculated move to enhance his professional image. A hyphenated name suggested a modern, progressive man to his clients and colleagues. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Why?" I asked, sliding the door open just enough to speak clearly. For the first time since I'd arrived home, Marcus looked directly at me. His gray eyes, which I'd once found distinguished, were cold and measuring. "Because, Elena, I'm up for the executive vice president position. The board is making their decision next month. Do you have any idea what it would look like if they came here for dinner and saw all of that? All of that. My life reduced to an inconvenience for his career advancement. Besides," he continued, turning back to the television, "Dr. Rodriguez said you'd be on bed rest for at least 2 weeks. I figured this was the perfect time to handle it without you getting all emotional about every little thing." Emotional. Another word he used to dismiss my feelings, my attachments, my very humanity. I pressed my hand against my surgical site. The physical pain a welcome distraction from the emotional devastation coursing through me. "I saved what was important," Marcus added, as if offering a consolation prize. "Your diplomas, birth certificate, social security card, the documents. They're in the fireproof safe." Documents. Legal papers. Things that had actual, measurable value in Marcus's world. Everything else, the photographs, the keepsakes, the tangible memories of a life lived before him, had been deemed disposable. I closed my eyes, feeling something shift inside me. Not just heartbreak, though that was certainly there. Not just betrayal, though the sting of that was overwhelming. Something harder, colder, more calculating. Something that reminded me of who I'd been before I'd met Marcus, before I'd let his certainty about everything convince me to doubt my own instincts. Before Marcus, I'd been Elena Vasquez, financial crimes investigator for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'd spent 12 years tracking down white-collar criminals, unraveling complex schemes, following paper trails that led to some of the most sophisticated fraudsters in the country. I'd been good at it, very good. So good that I'd been recruited by private firms offering triple my government salary. I'd met Marcus during one of those investigations. His firm, Blackwood Financial, had been peripherally involved in a Ponzi scheme we were unraveling. Marcus had been their liaison with law enforcement, helpful and charming and utterly convincing in his assertions of the firm's innocence. When the investigation concluded, with Blackwood cleared of any wrongdoing, Marcus had asked me to dinner. The courtship had been a whirlwind. Marcus was sophisticated, successful, and seemingly smitten with my intelligence and independence. When he proposed after only 6 months, he'd painted a picture of a life where I could leave the stress of federal investigations behind, maybe start my own consulting firm, work on cases that interested me rather than whatever the Bureau assigned for. The first few years of our marriage, that's exactly what I'd done. I'd built a successful practice helping small businesses investigate employee fraud and corporate theft. But gradually, Marcus had become more vocal about the image my work projected. Federal investigations were fine, he said, but catching small-time embezzlers wasn't befitting the wife of a senior executive at Blackwood. So I'd scaled back. Then scaled back more. Eventually, I'd convinced myself that Marcus was right. I didn't need to work. We had plenty of money, and wouldn't it be nice to focus on other things? Travel, perhaps. Charity work. The kind of activities appropriate for someone in my social position now, standing among the ashes of my previous life. I realized what I'd really given up. Not just my career, but my instincts. My ability to see patterns, to spot inconsistencies, to recognize when someone was running a con. Marcus had been running a con on me for 8 years. "I'm going to lie down," I said, my voice steady now. "Good idea," Marcus replied without looking up. Dr. Rodriguez was very specific about rest and recovery. "I've already told my assistant to postpone any dinner parties until you're feeling better." Dinner parties? Of course. Because the real concern wasn't my health, it was ensuring I'd be a proper hostess when his colleagues came to view his newly pristine home. I walked slowly up the stairs to our bedroom, each step measured and deliberate. In the bathroom, I carefully removed my surgical bandages and examined the healing incision. 3 small laparoscopic wounds, professionally closed and already beginning to heal. I'd been lucky, the surgeon said my gallbladder had been close to rupturing. Emergency surgery had saved my life. While I was fighting for my life, my husband had been systematically destroying every trace of who I'd been before him. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop. The password screen appeared, and I entered the complex combination I'd memorized years ago but rarely used anymore. The system accepted my credentials, and suddenly I was looking at databases I hadn't accessed in nearly 3 years: financial records, corporate filings, SEC reports, banking information. All the tools I'd once used to catch criminals who thought they were too smart to get caught. I pulled up Blackwood Financial's public records first, just to refresh my memory. The firm managed approximately $2.3 billion in client assets, with Marcus's strategic development division responsible for about 30% of that total. His salary and bonuses were substantial, well into 7 figures annually, but I wasn't interested in the public information. I was interested in the patterns, the inconsistencies, the small details that most people overlooked, but that had made me one of the Bureau's most successful investigators. Marcus had made one crucial mistake when he destroyed my belongings. He'd assumed I was just the devoted wife who'd given up her career for love. He'd forgotten that underneath the carefully constructed domestic facade was someone who knew exactly how to destroy a man's life using nothing but patience, skill, and the truth. I opened a new document and began typing. At the top of the page, I wrote, "Investigation, Marcus Blackwood Morrison, Preliminary Assessment." Then I started with what I knew. Marcus's work schedule, his business associates, his financial patterns. The late-night phone calls he thought I didn't notice. The out-of-town trips that seemed to happen with increasing frequency. The new passwords on his devices, the separate credit card statements that came to his office instead of our home, all the small details that a loving wife might overlook but a trained investigator would flag as potential indicators of something worth examining more closely. By the time Marcus came upstairs 3 hours later, I was back in bed with my laptop closed, playing the role of the recovering patient. He kissed my forehead absently, already mentally preparing for another day of climbing the corporate ladder. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his tone suggesting he wasn't particularly interested in the answer. "Better," I replied honestly. "Much better." He nodded and headed for his private bathroom, the one he'd had installed last year for convenience. Through the wall, I could hear him talking quietly on his phone, another late-night business call that couldn't wait until morning. I closed my eyes and listened to the muffled conversation, picking out words and phrases. Nothing concrete, but patterns were beginning to emerge. Tomorrow, I would start the real work. Tonight, I would rest and heal and plan. Marcus had burned my past, thinking he could control my future. But he'd made one fatal error in judgment. He'd forgotten that some fires don't destroy, they forge steel, and I was about to become very, very strong. The investigation would begin tomorrow, but the outcome was already certain. Marcus Blackwood Morrison had just declared war on the wrong woman. And unlike my destroyed belongings, his career wouldn't just burn, it would be reduced to ashes so fine that no amount of money or influence would ever be able to resurrect it. After all, I'd spent 12 years learning exactly how to catch criminals who thought they were untouchable. The only difference was that this time, it was personal, very personal indeed. The morning after my discovery, I woke to the sound of Marcus in the shower, humming some tune I didn't recognize. The normalcy of it, his routine unchanged despite having destroyed my entire emotional history, crystallized my resolve. I had work to do. I waited until his car disappeared down our tree-lined street before opening my laptop again. The first rule of any financial investigation: follow the money. But with Marcus, I had an advantage no federal case had ever given me: intimate knowledge of his habits, his schedule, and his weaknesses. I started with his credit card statements. The ones that came to the house. Marcus was meticulous about his image, which meant every purchase was calculated. Lunch at Romano's every Tuesday with colleagues. Monthly haircuts at the most expensive salon in the city. Suits tailored exclusively at Winston & Associates. Everything designed to project success and reliability, but it was the anomalies that interested me. 3 charges to Delacroix Jewelers in the past 2 months, each for exactly $2,847. Oddly specific amounts, always on Thursdays, always paid with his personal card rather than our joint account. I made a note and kept digging. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus: "How are you feeling? Staying in bed like the doctor ordered?" I responded with appropriate gratitude: "Much better. Resting as instructed. Thank you for taking such good care of everything." His reply was immediate: "Always, darling. Important client dinner tonight. Will be late." Client dinner. On a Wednesday. I pulled up Marcus's business calendar. He'd given me access years ago when I occasionally helped coordinate his social obligations. Tonight's schedule was blocked out as strategic planning session, internal team only. First lie of the day. It was barely 9 a.m. I spent the next hour establishing secure access to databases I hadn't touched in years. My FBI credentials were long expired, but I'd maintained my private investigator's license, initially for my consulting work, later out of habit. More importantly, I'd cultivated relationships with people who had access to information that wasn't quite public record. My first call was to Sarah Chen, a forensic accountant who'd worked on several bureau cases with me. She'd left federal service around the same time I did, but for a better reason: she'd started her own firm specializing in corporate fraud detection. Elena Vasquez. Sarah's voice carried surprise and pleasure. "It's been what, 3 years? How's married life treating you?" "Complicated," I said, then cut straight to business. "I need a favor, Sarah." "Off the books." There was a pause. Sarah and I had worked together long enough that she could read between lines. "Personal or professional?" "Both." "I need a deep dive on Blackwood Financial, specifically their strategic development division. Any irregularities, pattern anomalies? Anything that doesn't smell right?" "That's Marcus's firm." Not a question. Sarah had attended our wedding reception. "Yes." Another pause, longer this time. "Elena, if this is what I think it is, I need to know what I'm dealing with," I interrupted. "Can you help or not?" "Give me 48 hours, Sarah said. "And Elena? Be careful." The warning in her voice told me she'd already heard rumors about Blackwood. In the tight-knit world of financial services, whispers traveled fast. Next, I called Tommy Rodriguez, no relation to my surgeon, a former bureau tech specialist who now ran a private digital forensics company. Tommy had always been able to find information that officially didn't exist. "Elena. Heard you retired to the good life. What can I do for you?" "I need surveillance data on a subject. Phone records, travel patterns, digital footprint. Full spectrum. Analysis. Federal case? Private matter. Very private." Tommy's tone shifted. "Personal protection situation?" It was easier to let him think that than explain the truth. "Something like that. Can you handle it discreetly? Send me what you have. I'll see what I can turn up." By noon, I had 6 different lines of inquiry running simultaneously. While my body healed, my mind had snapped back into investigative mode. With startling clarity. It felt like flexing muscles I'd forgotten I had. I was reviewing Marcus's travel expenses when I heard a car in the driveway. Too early for Marcus, his assistant's white Honda. I watched from the bedroom window as a young woman I didn't recognize approached the front door carrying what looked like a large manila envelope. I made it downstairs just as she rang the bell, moving carefully to avoid straining my incision. "Mrs. Morrison? I'm Ashley from Mr. Morrison's office. He asked me to drop this off for you." She handed over the envelope with a bright smile. "He wanted to make sure you had everything you needed for your recovery." The envelope was thick, official looking. I waited until Ashley left before opening it. Inside were photocopies of insurance documents, medical forms, and a letter from Marcus's attorney outlining the property disposal procedures he'd followed while I was hospitalized. Property disposal procedures. As if my life's possessions were hazardous waste requiring special handling, but it was the letterhead that caught my attention: Pemberton, Wallace and Associates. I knew that firm. They'd represented several defendants in bureau cases over the years. High-end white-collar defense attorneys who specialized in keeping wealthy clients out of prison. Why would Marcus need that kind of legal representation for disposing of household items? I photographed every document and uploaded them to a secure server I'd established that morning. Pattern recognition was one of my strongest skills, and patterns were already emerging. The afternoon brought a call from an unknown number. Mrs. Morrison? This is Detective Patricia Weiss with the Metropolitan Police. I understand you recently had some property destroyed in a fire. My pulse quickened. Yes, my husband handled the situation while I was in the hospital. I'm sure he did. The thing is, we received a complaint from one of your neighbors about the burning. Apparently, some of the materials created toxic smoke. The fire department filed a report. I gripped the phone tighter. I wasn't aware there were any issues. Oh, there weren't any official violations. Your husband was very cooperative, provided all the proper documentation. But I'm required to follow up with property owners in cases like this. Would you be available for a brief conversation tomorrow? Of course. Is there something specific you need to know? Just routine questions about the contents of the fire, insurance claims, that sort of thing. Nothing to worry about. But I was worried. Police didn't investigate legal property disposal unless someone had reported something suspicious. Which meant either a neighbor had seen something concerning, or Marcus's proper documentation had raised red flags. After the call, I spent an hour researching fire disposal regulations. What I found was illuminating. Marcus had been required to obtain permits for any outdoor burning that included synthetic materials, chemicals, or items that might produce toxic smoke. The permits required detailed inventories of materials being destroyed. I pulled up the city's public records database and searched for recent burning permits issued to our address. Nothing. Either Marcus had filed under a different system, or he'd burned everything without proper authorization. That evening, I positioned myself in the upstairs study where I could see Marcus's arrival. He pulled into the garage at exactly 6:15 p.m., early for someone who'd claimed he'd be late for a client dinner. I listened to his footsteps on the stairs, the familiar pattern of his evening routine. Shower first, then his study to check emails, then downstairs for dinner. Except tonight, he went straight to his study and closed the door. The walls in our house were solid, but not soundproof. I could hear him making phone calls, his voice too low to make out words but intense enough to suggest the conversations weren't casual. 20 minutes later, he emerged and knocked on the bedroom door. Elena? How was your day? Quiet, I said, minimizing my laptop screen as he entered. Ashley stopped by with some papers. Good, good. Just some insurance documentation. Have to cross all the T's, you know. He sat on the edge of the bed, his expression carefully neutral. How are you feeling? Pain manageable? Getting better each day. Detective Weiss called, though. Something about the fire? Marcus's expression didn't change, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. Routine follow-up. Nothing to worry about. The fire department has to investigate any smoke complaints from neighbors. I thought you said the fire department was surprisingly efficient. They were. But you know how these things go, paperwork, bureaucracy. I'll handle it. He kissed my forehead and headed back downstairs. Through the window, I watched him walk out to the backyard with a large trash bag. By the time he came back, inside, whatever evidence might have remained from his bonfire was gone. My phone buzzed with the first report from Tommy Rodriguez. Marcus's cell phone records showed an unusual pattern of calls to a number registered to Cayman Islands Financial Services. The calls had started 3 months ago and occurred with increasing frequency, always from locations away from his office, always lasting less than 2 minutes. Cayman Islands. Offshore banking. Money laundering. Tax evasion. The possibilities were endless, but all pointed in the same direction: Marcus was involved in something that required hiding money from regulatory oversight. I cross-referenced the dates of those calls with his credit card charges. Every call corresponded with a day he claimed to be working late or attending client dinners. But the card charges showed he'd actually been at a hotel bar downtown, the same hotel where Blackwood Financial maintained corporate suites for visiting clients. Sarah Chen's preliminary report arrived by encrypted email at 11 p.m. Elena, initial scan of Blackwood shows some interesting patterns. Their strategic development division has been unusually active in foreign exchange markets, particularly Caribbean jurisdictions. Client fund transfers show irregular timing patterns that don't match reported investment strategies. Recommend deeper analysis of specific account movements. We'll send detailed breakdown tomorrow. Foreign exchange markets. Caribbean jurisdictions. The pieces were starting to form a picture, and it wasn't pretty. I pulled up Marcus's business travel records from the past year. For trips to Miami, each lasting 3 days, each scheduled as client development initiatives. But his expense reports showed hotel charges in South Beach rather than the financial district, meals at expensive restaurants rather than business establishments, and car service to private residences rather than corporate offices. At 11:47 p.m. Marcus came upstairs and found me apparently asleep with my laptop closed beside me. "Still working too hard," he murmured, probably thinking I couldn't hear him. He was wrong about that. I was working exactly as hard as the situation required. The next morning brought Detective Weiss to my front door at 9 a.m. sharp. She was younger than I'd expected, with sharp eyes that missed nothing as I invited her into the living room. "I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me, Mrs. Morrison. I know you're recovering from surgery." "Of course. Though I'm not sure how much help I can be. I was in the hospital when everything happened." Detective Weiss pulled out a small notebook. "That's actually what I wanted to discuss. The timing seems unusual, disposing of personal property while a spouse is hospitalized." I chose my words carefully. "My husband said he wanted to surprise me with a fresh start. He's always been very particular about organization and appearance." "I see. And the items that were burned, were any of them valuable? Antiques, jewelry, art?" The question hung between us. If I said yes, it raised questions about insurance fraud. If I said no, it contradicted the evidence from neighbors who'd seen expensive items in the flames. "Some family heirlooms," I said. Finally. "Things with sentimental value rather than monetary worth." Detective Weiss made a note. The fire department's report mentioned synthetic materials that produced toxic smoke. Burned electronics, perhaps? Computers, phones? I honestly don't know exactly what my husband disposed of. You'd have to ask him for specifics. We tried. Mr. Morrison's assistant said he's unavailable this week. Business travel. That was news to me. Marcus had left for the office that morning, with no mention of travel plans. "Would you happen to know where he's traveling?" Detective Weiss asked. "I'm afraid I don't. The surgery and recovery have left me a bit out of touch with his schedule." After the detective left, I immediately checked Marcus's business calendar. It showed him in back-to-back meetings all week, with no travel indicated. Either he was lying to the police, lying to me, or both. I called his office and asked for his assistant. "Oh, Mrs. Morrison. How are you feeling? Mr. Morrison is so worried about your recovery." "Much better, thank you. Is Marcus available? I wanted to check about dinner plans." "I'm so sorry, but he left for Miami this morning." "Didn't he tell you?" "It was a last-minute client emergency. He'll be back Friday." Miami again. The fourth unscheduled trip in 6 months. I hung up and immediately called Sarah Chen. "I need that detailed analysis today," I said without preamble. "And I need you to run a specific check on any Blackwood accounts connected to Miami-based financial institutions." "Elena, what exactly are you walking into here?" "Nothing I can't handle. But I need ammunition, and I need it fast." The afternoon brought revelations that confirmed my worst suspicions. Tommy Rodriguez had traced Marcus's digital footprint during his Miami trips. Instead of client meetings, his phone GPS showed him visiting 3 specific locations repeatedly: a private banking facility in Coral Gables, a law office specializing in international finance, and most damning of all, A luxury condominium registered to a shell company called Morrison Development LLC. Morrison Development LLC. A company I'd never heard of, using our family name, established 3 months after our wedding. I spent the next hour tracing the company's registration documents. The managing member was listed as MB Morrison, Marcus's initials. The registered address was a mail forwarding service in Delaware. The stated purpose was international investment consultation. Sarah's detailed report arrived at 4 p.m. and painted a picture of systematic financial fraud that was both elegant and devastating. Marcus's strategic development division had been moving client funds through a series of offshore accounts before investing them in legitimate securities. The money always ended up where it was supposed to be, earning the promised returns for clients, but for brief periods, sometimes only hours. Millions of dollars sat in accounts that Marcus controlled personally. The interest earned during those periods, compounded across hundreds of transactions, had generated substantial undeclared income that never appeared on Blackwood's books. It was called salami slicing, skimming tiny amounts from large transactions. Individually, the amounts were too small to notice. Collectively, they represented systematic embezzlement totaling millions of dollars over several years. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Miami meetings going well. Miss you. Rest up. Home Friday evening. I stared at the message, thinking about the sophisticated criminal enterprise my husband had been operating while I'd been playing the dutiful corporate wife. He'd been stealing from his clients, hiding money offshore, and using our marriage as cover for his activities, and then he'd destroyed my belongings to eliminate any trace of the woman who might have been capable of discovering his crimes. But Marcus had made a crucial miscalculation. He'd assumed that 8 years of domestic life had dulled my investigative instincts. He'd forgotten that once you learn to see patterns, to follow money trails, to recognize criminal behavior, those skills don't disappear, they just wait for the right moment to resurface. Tomorrow, I would begin the systematic destruction of Marcus Blackwood Morrison's carefully constructed criminal empire. Tonight, I would plan exactly how to ensure he lost everything he'd stolen from others, and everything he'd taken from me. The investigation phase was complete. Now came the justice phase, and unlike the mercy I might have shown as an FBI agent, bound by constitutional protections and procedural safeguards, this time I had no such restrictions. This time, it was personal. Thursday morning arrived with the crisp precision of a perfectly executed plan. Marcus was trapped in Miami, believing his secrets were safe, while I had 48 hours to set mechanisms in motion that would be irreversible by the time he returned. I started with the most dangerous element, the evidence that could disappear if Marcus suspected he was being investigated. Using credentials Tommy Rodriguez had provided, I accessed the cloud storage accounts linked to Marcus's devices. What I found exceeded even my cynical expectations: spreadsheets detailing every fraudulent transaction, going back 5 years. Email correspondence with Cayman Islands bankers. Digital copies of falsified investment reports sent to Blackwood clients. Marcus had kept meticulous records of his crimes, probably as insurance against his offshore partners or leverage against his employers. Criminals always believe they're smarter than they are. Marcus's digital files were organized with the same obsessive precision he applied to his appearance and public image. Every theft was cataloged, every laundered dollar tracked, every lie documented. He'd created a perfect roadmap for his own prosecution. I downloaded everything to encrypted drives, then spent 2 hours creating multiple backup copies stored in various secure locations. The beauty of digital evidence was its reproducibility. Unlike my destroyed photographs and heirlooms, these files could be replicated infinitely. My phone rang at 10:30 a.m. Sarah Chen, her voice tight with concern. Elena, we need to talk. In person. Can you meet me? I'm supposed to be on bed rest. This can't wait. There's something about Blackwood Financial that you need to see immediately. An hour later, I was sitting in Sarah's office, trying not to wince as my healing incision protested the movement. She'd pulled all the blinds and locked the door, treating this like the federal briefing it essentially was. Your husband isn't just embezzling from client accounts, Sarah said without preamble. He's running a Ponzi scheme. She spread documents across her desk, each one more damning than the last. The Strategic Development Division promises returns that are mathematically impossible based on their stated investment strategies. They're paying early investors with money from new clients, skimming massive amounts for offshore accounts, and covering it all with increasingly elaborate lies. I studied the financial projections, seeing immediately what Sarah had discovered. How long before it collapses? 6 months, maybe less. The client base is growing too fast for the underlying fraud to sustain. When it implodes, we're looking at losses in the hundreds of millions. Hundreds of millions. Retirees who would lose their life savings. College funds that would evaporate. Small businesses that would go bankrupt. Marcus wasn't just stealing money, he was destroying lives on an industrial scale. There's more, Sarah continued. I traced some of the offshore accounts. Your husband has been working with a group that federal authorities have been tracking for money laundering. If this comes out, it's not just fraud charges, it's RICO. Conspiracy, international financial crimes. RICO. Racketeering charges that could put Marcus away for decades. I felt a cold satisfaction spreading through my chest. How much evidence would the authorities need to move on this? I asked. Sarah gave me a sharp look. Elena, you can't be thinking of how much evidence. She sighed, recognizing the tone I'd used in federal briefings when I'd made up my mind. About something. Account records, transaction logs, correspondence with the offshore partners. If someone had access to Marcus's personal files, hypothetically, the case would be airtight. But Elena, if you're planning what I think you're planning, you need to be careful. These people don't play games. If Marcus realizes he's been exposed. I thought about my destroyed belongings, about the casual cruelty in his voice when he dismissed my life as old junk. About the hundreds of innocent people who would lose everything if I didn't act. I need you to make some calls, I said. Federal contacts. People who would be interested in a gift-wrapped racketeering case. Back home, I began phase 2 of my plan. Marcus's home office was a shrine to his professional success, awards, photos with politicians and business leaders, certificates of achievement. All of it built on stolen money. I photographed everything, then began a systematic search for physical evidence. Hidden in his filing cabinet, behind legitimate business documents, I found contracts with Morrison Development LLC. Purchase agreements for the Miami condominium. Bank signature cards for accounts I'd never heard of. Most damning of all, a handwritten ledger in Marcus's precise script detailing payments to various individuals. Code names, dollar amounts, dates. A criminal's insurance policy against his co-conspirators. I was photographing the ledger when I heard a car in the driveway. Too early for Marcus, he wasn't due back until tomorrow. I quickly replaced everything. And made it upstairs just as the front door opened. Elena? A woman's voice, unfamiliar. I made my way downstairs carefully, finding a tall blonde in an expensive suit standing in my living room. She looked up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mrs. Morrison? I'm Victoria Westbrook, Marcus's new partner at Blackwood. He asked me to check on you while he's away. Partner. Marcus had never mentioned a new partner. I studied Victoria Westbrook, noting the designer handbag, the jewelry that probably cost more than most people's cars, the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what she wanted. That's very thoughtful, I said carefully. Marcus didn't mention you'd be stopping by. Last-minute decision. You know how he worries. Victoria moved through my living room like she owned it, touching surfaces, examining decorations. He told me about your recent spring cleaning. Very liberating, I'm sure. The way she said it made my skin crawl. This woman knew about the burning. More than knew, she approved of it. Are you working on the Miami project with Marcus? I asked, fishing for information. Victoria's smile became genuine for the first time. Among other things. Marcus speaks very highly of your understanding nature. How you've always supported his career ambitions without getting involved in the details. Translation, how I'd been the perfect naive wife who never asked inconvenient questions. I try to be supportive, I said. He's lucky to have someone so trusting. Victoria checked her watch. Well, I should go. Tell Marcus I stopped by. And, Mrs. Morrison? I hope you continue to be understanding about his work requirements. Some projects require absolute discretion. After she left, I immediately called Tommy Rodriguez. I need everything you can find on Victoria Westbrook, employed at Blackwood Financial. And I need it fast. Personal or professional? Both. She just threatened me in my own living room. Threatened how? I thought about Victoria's tone, her casual familiarity with my destroyed belongings, her emphasis on my need to remain understanding and trusting. She's Marcus's partner in more ways than one, I said. And she wanted to make sure I know my place. Tommy's report arrived 2 hours later. Victoria Westbrook, 34, divorced, former prosecutor turned white-collar defense attorney before joining Blackwood Financial 6 months ago. Her specialty was helping wealthy clients navigate federal investigations. Her client list read like a who's who of financial criminals who'd avoided prosecution. More interesting were the personal details. Victoria owned a penthouse apartment 3 blocks from Marcus's Miami hotel. Her bank accounts showed deposits that perfectly corresponded with the dates of Marcus's offshore transfers. She'd been photographed at several social events in Miami, always with the same group of well-dressed men who Tommy's facial recognition software identified as persons of interest in federal money laundering investigations. Marcus wasn't just stealing money and hiding it offshore. He was working with professional criminals, and Victoria was his handler. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Meetings concluded early. Flying home tonight instead of Friday. Can't wait to see you. Change of plans. Either Marcus was genuinely eager to return, or someone had warned him that his wife was asking too many questions. Victoria's visit suddenly made more sense. She'd been assessing whether I was a threat. I had 6 hours before. Marcus returned. Time to implement the final phase of my trap. I called Detective Weiss first. Detective? This is Elena Morrison. I wanted to follow up on our conversation about the fire. Of course, Mrs. Morrison. Have you remembered anything else about the items that were destroyed? Actually, yes. I realized my husband may not have disposed of some things legally. There were electronics, chemicals, items that probably required special handling. I paused, letting concern creep into my voice. I'm worried there might have been environmental violations. What kind of items specifically? Computer equipment, old paint cans from our garage, some medical supplies I'd been storing. Things that probably shouldn't have been burned in a residential fire. Detective Weiss was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Morrison, if your husband disposed of hazardous materials without proper permits, that could be a serious violation. Would you be willing to provide a detailed inventory? Of course. I want to do the right thing. Next, I called the tip line for the Securities and Exchange Commission. Anonymous reporting, untraceable, perfect for setting federal investigations in motion. I have information about securities fraud at Blackwood Financial, I said when the operator answered. Systematic client fund embezzlement and offshore money laundering. The evidence is comprehensive and immediately actionable. The operator took down details, asking for specifics about amounts, timeframes, and evidence sources. I provided everything Sarah had documented, plus the additional information from Marcus's files. Ma'am, allegations this serious require verification. Are you willing to provide supporting documentation? I'll send everything through secure channels. The evidence is substantial and time-sensitive. I believe the primary suspect may be attempting to flee the country. My final call was to Agent Jennifer Walsh at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. We'd worked together on several major cases before my retirement. She owed me a favor from a case that had made her career. Elena Vasquez. Holy shit, I thought you'd disappeared into suburban bliss. Jennifer, I need to cash in that favor. Big time. What kind of favor? The kind where you get handed a RICO case that'll make your boss's boss very happy, and I get to see justice served on someone who deserves it. Personal? Very. But legitimate. Multi-million-dollar fraud, international money laundering, enough. Evidence to prosecute successfully. Interested? When and where? I gave her the address of a coffee shop near my house. 1 hour. Come alone, and bring a recorder. You're going to want to document everything I'm about to tell you. By 6 p.m., the trap was set. Detective Weiss had opened a formal investigation into illegal hazardous waste disposal. The SEC had assigned the Blackwood case to their rapid response team. Agent Walsh had enough evidence to obtain federal warrants by morning. Marcus's flight was due at 8:30 p.m. I positioned myself in the living room with a clear view of the driveway. My laptop opened to what appeared to be a harmless shopping website but was actually a secure portal where I was uploading the final pieces of evidence to federal servers. At 9:15 p.m., Marcus's car pulled into the garage. I closed my laptop and arranged myself on the couch, playing the recovering patient waiting patiently for her husband's return. "Elena? I'm home." His voice carried the false cheerfulness of someone who thought he'd successfully managed a crisis. He came into the living room carrying flowers and a small gift bag, his expression carefully composed in the mask of the loving husband. "How are you feeling? I hated being away while you were recovering." "Much better," I said, accepting his kiss on the forehead. "Victoria stopped by to check on me. She seems nice." I watched his face carefully. The brief tightening around his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He hadn't authorized Victoria's visit. She'd acted independently, probably to assess whether I was becoming a problem. "Victoria's very dedicated to the firm," Marcus said carefully. "Sometimes too dedicated." "I hope she wasn't intrusive." "Not at all. We had a lovely chat about your work. She mentioned how lucky you are to have someone so understanding about your travel schedule." Marcus relaxed slightly, interpreting my words as confirmation that his secrets remained safe. "The Miami project is moving into its final phase," he said, settling into his chair. "There may be more travel required over the next few weeks." "Of course. Whatever you need to do." We spent the evening in domestic normalcy, Marcus sharing edited versions of his business meetings, me providing updates on my recovery. To any observer, we were a typical married couple reconnecting after a brief separation, but beneath the surface, we were both playing elaborate games. Marcus was assessing whether I suspected anything about his criminal activities. I was documenting his lies and building the final pieces of evidence that would destroy him. By the time we went to bed, I knew exactly how the next few days would unfold. Federal agents would arrive Monday morning with warrants for Marcus's arrest and seizure of all Blackwood financial records. Detective Weiss would charge him with illegal disposal of hazardous materials. The SEC would freeze all accounts associated with his offshore scheme. Marcus fell asleep easily, the sleep of someone who believed he'd successfully managed all potential threats to his empire. I lay awake listening to his breathing, thinking about the hundreds of people whose lives he'd destroyed for money. About my grandmother's jewelry lying in ashes in our backyard. About Victoria Westbrook's casual threat. In my own living room, tomorrow, Marcus would wake up as a successful executive with a bright future. By Monday evening, he would be a federal defendant facing decades in prison, and unlike my destroyed belongings, his downfall would be permanent, documented, and absolutely irreversible. The investigation was complete. The evidence was secure. The authorities were mobilized. Now came the beautiful, terrible, perfectly justified moment when Marcus Blackwood Morrison would discover that some fires burn everything in their path, including the people who light them. Friday morning dawned. With deceptive normalcy. Marcus went through his usual routine: shower, expensive coffee, reviewing his phone while eating breakfast. But I noticed the small tells that betrayed his anxiety: checking his email more frequently than usual, taking phone calls in his study with the door closed. That particular tension in his shoulders that appeared when deals were going sideways, something had him spooked, and it wasn't my innocent questions about Victoria. "I'll be working late tonight," Marcus announced, straightening his tie with the precision of a man who believed his image was his armor. "The Miami project requires some final adjustments." "On a Friday night? High-stakes clients don't respect weekends, darling." He kissed my forehead, but his attention was already elsewhere. "Victoria and I need to wrap up some loose ends before the markets open Monday." Victoria again. Whatever crisis had prompted Marcus's early return from Miami was serious enough to require weekend damage control. After he left, I opened my laptop to find an encrypted message from Agent Walsh: "Warrants approved. Coordinated operation begins 0800 Monday. Subjects under surveillance effective immediately. Maintain normal routine. JW, subjects under surveillance." Marcus and Victoria had no idea they were being watched by federal agents documenting their every move. While they scrambled to contain whatever crisis had emerged, law enforcement was building the final pieces of an airtight case. At 10 a.m., Detective Weiss called with an update that sent cold satisfaction through my veins. Mrs. Morrison, we've completed our analysis of the fire debris. You were right about the hazardous materials. We found evidence of burned electronics, chemical containers, and what appears to be medical waste. Your husband violated at least 6 environmental regulations. I was afraid of that. Is there anything I need to do? We'll need you to come in Monday morning to sign a formal complaint. The district attorney wants to file charges for illegal disposal, environmental contamination, and destruction of property without proper permits. Property destruction? Some of the items burned appear to have had significant value. Art, jewelry, collectibles. If your husband destroyed valuable property without your consent while you were incapacitated, that's a criminal matter. I hadn't considered that angle. Marcus hadn't just violated environmental laws, he'd committed felony destruction of property. My property. Detective, I should mention that I've been thinking more about what was destroyed. There were items with considerable sentimental and monetary value. Family heirlooms, art pieces, collectibles. Can you provide detailed descriptions and estimated values? I can do better than that. I have photographs and appraisal documents. The lies came easily now, supported by carefully crafted documentation. I'd prepared the night before. For insurance purposes, I had everything cataloged. The total value was approximately $180,000. $180,000? Detective Weiss's voice sharpened. Mrs. Morrison, destruction of property valued over $100,000 is a felony. If your husband destroyed items worth that much, without your knowledge or consent, I trusted him to handle things appropriately while I was recovering. I never imagined he would destroy items of such value. After the call, I spent an hour creating a comprehensive inventory of my destroyed belongings, complete with fabricated appraisals and insurance documentation. Marcus's legal troubles were multiplying exponentially: federal fraud charges, state felony charges, environmental violations. By the time I finished, he was facing potential imprisonment that could span decades. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen: emergency. Need to meet immediately. Don't come to my office. Coffee shop on 5th Street. Come alone. 40 minutes later, I found Sarah in a corner booth, her face pale and her usual composure shattered. Elena, we have a problem. A big one. What kind of problem? She slid a manila folder across the table. Victoria Westbrook isn't just Marcus's business partner. She's a federal informant. I opened the folder to find surveillance photographs, FBI briefing documents, and communication logs that painted a completely different picture than what I'd assumed. Victoria had been feeding information to federal authorities for 8 months, building a case against the same money laundering network that Marcus was working with. She's been investigating Marcus? I asked, struggling to process this development. Not exactly. She's been investigating the offshore banking network. Marcus was supposed to be a small fish in a bigger investigation. But your evidence dump yesterday changed everything. The feds realized they have a much bigger case than they thought. I studied the documents, my investigative mind automatically analyzing the new information. If Victoria is working with the FBI, why did she come to my house? Why the threatening tone? Because she realized you were dangerous to her operation. A suspicious wife asking questions could blow months of undercover work. She was trying to assess whether you were a threat to her investigation. And Marcus doesn't know she's informing? Sarah shook her head. He thinks she's his criminal partner. She's been feeding him information and opportunities that look lucrative but actually generate evidence for federal prosecutors. Every transaction he's made through her channels has been documented. I felt a mixture of admiration and frustration. Victoria had been playing Marcus expertly, using his greed and arrogance against him. But her investigation had been moving slowly, carefully, methodically. My evidence dump had accelerated everything, potentially compromising her deeper investigation into the international network. How much does she know about my involvement? I asked. Everything. Your phone calls to federal contacts, the evidence you provided, your background as a former agent. She knows you've been investigating Marcus independently. Is that a problem? Sarah gave me a look I remembered from our federal days. Elena, Victoria Westbrook has spent 8 months building a career-making case. You've just provided evidence. That could let prosecutors skip the long investigation and go straight to arrests. From her perspective, you're either a valuable asset or a dangerous variable. Which am I? That depends on what happens next. If Marcus gets spooked and runs, it compromises her investigation into the bigger network. If he gets arrested before they can roll up his international contacts, major criminals walk free. I thought about Victoria's visit, her emphasis on my need to remain understanding and trusting. She hadn't been threatening me about Marcus's affairs, she'd been warning me not to interfere with her investigation. What does she want from me? Meet with her. Tonight. She wants to coordinate your evidence with her operation. Make sure the arrests happen in the right sequence to maximize the case against everyone involved. The address Sarah gave me was a private dining room at an upscale hotel downtown. When I arrived at 8 p.m., Victoria was already there, but she looked nothing like the polished professional who'd invaded my living room. Her expensive suit was wrinkled, her makeup minimal, her demeanor all business. Mrs. Morrison. Thank you for coming. Agent Westbrook, I assume. Special Agent Victoria Westbrook, FBI Financial Crimes Division. I apologize for the deception yesterday, but I needed to assess the situation quickly. She gestured for me to sit across from her at a table set for two. Room service had provided coffee and sandwiches, but Victoria's attention was focused entirely on the laptop computer and manila folders spread between us. Your evidence is impressive, she said without preamble. Comprehensive, well-documented, legally admissible. It's also potentially catastrophic for an investigation that's taken 8 months to develop. I wasn't aware there was an ongoing investigation. Of course you weren't. Marcus doesn't know either. As far as he's concerned, I'm Victoria Westbrook, former prosecutor turned financial consultant, helping him move money through Caribbean banking networks. She opened one of the folders, revealing surveillance photos of Marcus meeting with men I didn't recognize. These are the real targets of our investigation. Marcus is small time compared to these people. They run a network that launders billions of dollars annually for drug cartels, arms dealers, human traffickers. We've been using Marcus to get closer to them. And my evidence threatens that? Your evidence could put Marcus in federal custody Monday morning, which would be justice for his crimes against you and his clients. But it would also alert his contacts that their network has been compromised. They'd disappear, change their methods, start over somewhere else. I studied the photographs, recognizing the type of criminals Victoria was describing. The kind who solve problems by making people disappear. What are you proposing? Coordination. We let your husband dig himself deeper over the next 2 weeks, while we document his contacts and communications. Then we arrest everyone simultaneously, Marcus, his offshore partners, the entire network. And in the meantime, Marcus continues stealing from his clients. Victoria's expression hardened. Elena, can I call you Elena? I understand your desire for immediate justice. But Marcus has stolen millions. These people have stolen billions. The greater good requires patience. I thought about the hundreds of innocent people losing their retirement savings while federal agents played longer games for bigger headlines. How do I know you're not just using me to build your case? I asked. Because you're going to be part of it. Officially. Victoria slid a document across the table. Temporary Special Agent Status, Federal Bureau of Investigation. You provide continued access to Marcus's personal communications and activities. We provide you with protection and the guarantee that he faces the maximum possible charges when this concludes. The document was real. I recognized the formatting from my own federal service. Victoria was offering me a chance to be part of Marcus's downfall rather than just a witness to it. Protection from whom? Marcus's offshore partners. Aren't businessmen, Elena. They're violent criminals. If they discover you've been investigating their operation, you become a liability. As a federal agent, you have official protection and legal authority. And if I refuse? Then Marcus gets arrested Monday morning, his partners disappear, and you hope they don't decide you know too much to remain healthy. The threat was subtle but clear. I'd stumbled into something much larger and more dangerous than a simple embezzlement case. 2 weeks, I said finally. But I want guarantees about the charges Marcus will face. Victoria smiled for the first time that evening. Elena, by the time we're finished, your husband will face enough federal charges to ensure he never sees freedom again. RICO, money laundering, conspiracy, fraud, everything. She opened her laptop and showed me surveillance footage of Marcus's activities over the past months. Meeting with known criminals, transferring stolen money, participating in what was clearly a sophisticated criminal enterprise. We've documented everything. Every crime, every contact, every transaction. But we need him to lead us to the final pieces of the network. The money managers, the political contacts, the enforcement arm. Enforcement arm? The people who handle problems. Witnesses who ask too many questions. Investigators who get too close. Wives who discover too much. The implication sent a chill through me. These weren't just financial criminals, they were people who solved problems with violence. Your husband doesn't know about that side of the operation yet, Victoria continued. But he's about to be read in. Next week, they're promoting him from money mover to full partner. Which means he'll meet the people who really run this organization. And then you arrest everyone? Then we arrest everyone. Simultaneously, worldwide, with your husband's communications providing the evidence to prosecute the entire network. I thought about Marcus sleeping peacefully at home, believing his secrets were safe, unaware that his wife had become a federal agent and his business partner was documenting his every crime. What do you need from me? Victoria outlined the operation. I would continue my normal routine while secretly documenting Marcus's activities. His home computer, his phone calls, his meetings. Everything would be recorded and transmitted to federal servers for evidence compilation. He's planning something for this weekend, I said. Emergency meetings, damage control. He's scared about something. We know. One of his Cayman Islands accounts was flagged by international banking authorities yesterday. He thinks it's a random audit, but we triggered it to increase his stress level. Scared criminals make mistakes. You're manipulating him into incriminating himself further. We're giving him opportunities to demonstrate the full scope of his criminal activity. By the time we arrest him, there won't be a defense attorney in the country who could argue for anything less than life imprisonment. As I left the hotel, I realized that my simple desire for revenge had evolved into something much larger. I wasn't just destroying Marcus's life anymore, I was helping to dismantle an international criminal organization that had destroyed thousands of lives, but I was also walking deeper into a world where mistakes could be fatal, where the wrong word or action could make me a target for people who solve problems with extreme prejudice. Marcus came home at midnight, his face gray with exhaustion and stress. Whatever crisis he'd been managing all day had clearly gotten worse. Long day? I asked, looking up from my book. Challenging clients, he replied, pouring himself a drink from the bar in our living room. Some people don't understand the complexities of international finance. I'm sure you'll work it out. You always do. Marcus looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. For a moment, I wondered if he suspected something. But then he smiled, the same condescending expression he'd worn when dismissing my destroyed belongings. Yes, he said, raising his glass in a mock toast. I always do. If only he knew that his loving, understanding wife was now a federal agent building the case that would destroy him completely. That every word he spoke, every call he made, every move he planned was being documented for his own prosecution. 2 weeks. 14 days to watch Marcus dig his own grave while believing he was climbing toward greater success. I couldn't wait to see his face when he realized who had been holding the shovel. Monday morning arrived with the weight of secrets I could barely contain. As Marcus prepared for work, adjusting his tie with the meticulous care of a man who believed appearances could protect him from consequences, I was installing the last of the surveillance equipment Victoria's team had provided, microscopic recording devices in his study. Software that would mirror his computer activities to federal servers. A phone app that would capture every call, text, and email. By the time Marcus left for the office, our house had become a digital evidence collection center that would document his every criminal conversation. You look better today, Marcus said, kissing my forehead before leaving. The rest is helping. I'm feeling much stronger, I replied, which was absolutely true. For the first time since my surgery, I felt like myself again, not the diminished wife who collected sentimental objects, but the federal investigator who could dismantle criminal enterprises. 20 minutes after Marcus left, Victoria arrived. At my door carrying a briefcase and wearing the expression of someone about to deliver classified information. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, settling at my kitchen table and opening the case to reveal sophisticated monitoring equipment. "I've been ready for 8 years," I said. "I just didn't know it." Victoria connected a secure tablet to the surveillance network, and suddenly I could see everything Marcus was doing in real time. His computer screen, his phone activity, even audio from his office through the bug we'd placed in his pen, a pen I'd given him for his birthday 2 years ago. "Today is crucial," Victoria explained. "Our intelligence suggests Marcus will be contacted about his promotion to full partner in the organization. When that happens, he'll be given access to information that will let us identify and locate the network's leadership." On the tablet screen, I watched Marcus settling into his office, unaware that every keystroke was being recorded. His first action was to check his offshore account balances, a nervous habit Victoria's team had noticed developing over the past week. "He's scared," I observed, watching Marcus's fingers drum anxiously on his desk. "Good. Scared criminals are careless criminals. They take risks they wouldn't normally take, trust people they shouldn't trust, say things they should keep secret." Marcus's phone rang, and through our surveillance system, we could hear both sides of the conversation perfectly. "Mr. Morrison? This is Charles Brennan from Atlantic Consulting. We need to meet today. Something urgent has come up regarding your recent transactions." I saw Victoria tense. Charles Brennan wasn't a name in any of their files. "I'm not familiar with Atlantic Consulting," Marcus replied carefully. "You know us by our previous arrangement, Cayman Trust Services. We've been managing your account transfers for the past 6 months." Victoria was already typing rapidly on her laptop, running searches for Charles Brennan and Atlantic Consulting. Nothing appeared in any federal database. "The arrangement has changed," Brennan continued. "We need to discuss enhanced security protocols. Can you meet us this afternoon?" "I have a full schedule, Mr. Morrison. This isn't optional. Your recent activities have attracted unwanted attention. We need to ensure your continued cooperation." The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone for a long moment before making another call. "Victoria? Something's wrong. Can you meet me in my office immediately?" I looked at the real Victoria sitting beside me. "How do you handle this? You can't be in 2 places at once." "Watch and learn," Victoria said, pulling out her own phone. "Marcus? I just got your message. I'm actually in the lobby. Give me 5 minutes." She stood up, straightening her suit jacket. "I have to go play my role. Monitor everything while I'm gone. If anything seems dangerous, if Marcus gets suspicious or if unknown people show up at his office, call the emergency number immediately." After Victoria left, I found myself alone with the surveillance feeds, watching my husband's panic unfold in real time. Marcus was pacing his office, making increasingly frantic phone calls to numbers that weren't in his normal contact list. Each call was being recorded, each number traced by federal systems that would identify every person in his criminal network. At 2:30 p.m., Marcus left his office with Victoria, both of them heading toward the address Charles Brennan had provided. I tracked their progress through Victoria's GPS signal while listening to their conversation through her hidden microphone. "This is moving too fast," Marcus was saying. 6 months ago, I was managing simple offshore transfers. Now they want to meet about enhanced security protocols? That sounds like they're expecting law enforcement attention." "Maybe they're just being cautious," Victoria replied, playing her role perfectly. "Success attracts scrutiny. We knew this might happen eventually. But what if they know something we don't? What if someone's been investigating our operations?" Through the microphone, I could hear Victoria's slight pause before responding. "Marcus, you're paranoid. Who would investigate us? Your wife doesn't even know what you do for a living." The casual dismissal of my intelligence stung, even though I knew Victoria was maintaining her cover. But it also revealed something important. Marcus had never suspected that his wife might be capable of discovering his crimes. The meeting location was a private dining room at the Meridian Hotel, the same hotel where Victoria and I had met 3 days earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me that Marcus was walking into a trap in the exact location where I'd agreed to help set it. Through Victoria's audio feed, I listened as they were escorted to a room where 3 men waited. I recognized none of their voices, but their accents suggested international backgrounds, one possibly Caribbean, another Eastern European, the third indeterminate. "Mr. Morrison, Ms. Westbrook," the first voice said. "Thank you for coming on short notice. We have some concerns we need to address immediately." "What kind of concerns?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with anxiety. "The kind that suggest our operation may have been compromised. Tell me, Mr. Morrison, have you noticed anything unusual recently? Any changes in routine, unexpected questions, unfamiliar people showing interest in your activities?" There was a long pause. I could almost see Marcus's mind racing, probably thinking about Detective Weiss's questions about the fire, about my medical condition that had kept me home and possibly observant of his activities. "Nothing specific," Marcus said finally. "But I have been more careful about operational security." "Good. Because we've received intelligence that suggests federal authorities may be investigating Caribbean banking networks. If that's true, anyone connected to our operations could be at risk." "What does that mean for us?" Victoria asked, maintaining her cover perfectly. "It means we're accelerating the timeline. Mr. Morrison, you're being promoted to full operational partner effective immediately. Ms. Westbrook, you'll be managing the technical integration. We need to move approximately $200 million through clean channels within the next 72 hours. $200 million. The scope of the operation was staggering. "That's a substantial amount," Marcus said. "Moving that much money that quickly will attract attention. Which is why we're implementing enhanced protocols. Mr. Morrison, tomorrow you'll receive access to our primary operational accounts. You'll also be introduced to our security team." "Security team?" Victoria's warnings about the enforcement arm echoed in my mind. "Is additional security necessary?" Victoria asked. "Mr. Morrison's promotion comes with additional responsibilities and additional risks. Our security team ensures that operational partners understand the importance of discretion and loyalty." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Marcus was being brought into the inner circle, but with the understanding that betrayal would have violent consequences. The meeting concluded with arrangements for Marcus to receive new account access codes and to meet with the security team the following day. As Victoria and Marcus left the hotel, I could hear Marcus's labored breathing through the audio feed. He was finally beginning to understand that he was involved with people far more dangerous than simple financial criminals. "This is escalating beyond what I expected," Marcus said as they walked back to their cars. "Cold feet?" Victoria asked. "Realistic assessment. These people aren't just money launderers, Victoria. They're talking about security teams and operational loyalty. That sounds like organized crime." "It sounds like success, Marcus. Do you want to remain a small-time embezzler, or do you want to be part of something that generates real money?" Through the surveillance feed, I watched Victoria playing her role perfectly, encouraging Marcus to dig himself deeper while secretly documenting every incriminating word for federal prosecutors. When Marcus returned home that evening, he was visibly shaken. His usual confident demeanor had been replaced by nervous energy that manifested in compulsive checking of his phone and multiple trips to his study to verify that his computer files were secure. "How was your day?" I asked, looking up from the book I was pretending to read. "Complicated. Challenging clients, complex transactions. You know how it is." But I could see he was struggling with something much more serious than difficult clients. For the first time since I'd known him, Marcus looked genuinely frightened. "You seem stressed," I said gently. "Maybe you should take some time off. We could go somewhere relaxing." "No," Marcus said quickly. "I can't leave town right now. Too many critical projects in motion." He disappeared into his study, closing the door behind him. Through the surveillance system, I watched him making encrypted phone calls to numbers that weren't in his normal contact database. Each call was being traced by federal systems, each conversation recorded for evidence. At 11 p.m., Marcus received a call that changed everything. "Mr. Morrison, this is David Kane with Morrison Development LLC. Morrison Development, the shell company I discovered during my investigation." But David Kane wasn't a name Marcus had mentioned in any of his previous communications. I'm not familiar with that name, Marcus said carefully. I'm your new partner, Mr. Morrison. The previous management structure has been reorganized. Tomorrow you'll be meeting with our operational team to discuss your expanded responsibilities. What happened to the previous management? They had a disagreement with our security protocols. The disagreement was resolved permanently. The implication was clear and terrifying. The previous managers of Marcus's criminal organization had been killed. I see, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Morrison, I want to be very clear about expectations going forward. Operational partners who demonstrate loyalty and discretion are well compensated and protected. Partners who create problems for our organization are handled differently. Do you understand? Yes. Excellent. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Pier 47. Come alone. Bring all access codes and account information. You're about to become very wealthy, Mr. Morrison. And very committed to our success. After the call ended, Marcus sat in his study for nearly an hour, staring at his computer screen. Through the surveillance camera, I could see him weighing his options: continue deeper into an organization that clearly killed people who crossed them, or try to withdraw and face the consequences of backing out. Finally, he began typing an email to Victoria. Something has changed. The organization is more dangerous than we realized. People have been killed. I think we need to consider extracting ourselves before it's too late. Victoria's response came within minutes. Marcus, you're overreacting. Every large financial operation has security concerns. Don't let fear compromise a lucrative opportunity. Trust me. Reading Victoria's response, I realized the elegant trap she'd constructed. She was encouraging Marcus to attend the meeting that would provide federal authorities with access to the organization's leadership, while simultaneously documenting his willing participation in a criminal conspiracy he now knew involved murder. Marcus was no longer just an embezzler. He was about to become a knowing participant in an organization that killed people. When federal agents arrested him, they would have recorded evidence of his agreement to join a criminal enterprise he understood was violent. Whatever sympathy I might have retained for my husband, the man who'd burned my belongings while I lay in a hospital bed, evaporated completely. Marcus was choosing to work with killers for money. He deserved everything that was about to happen to him, but first, he had to survive long enough to provide the evidence that would destroy the entire organization. Tomorrow's meeting at Pier 47 would either be the federal government's greatest success in dismantling international organized crime, or it would be the day my husband disappeared permanently for asking too many questions. Either way, justice was finally within reach. Tuesday morning transformed our house into a federal command center. Victoria arrived at dawn with 3 other agents, transforming my dining room into a surveillance hub bristling with monitors, communication equipment, and enough recording devices to document a small war. Today changes everything, Agent Walsh explained as she tested the audio feeds from Marcus's surveillance equipment. Once we have recordings of the organization's leadership, we can coordinate arrests across 6 countries simultaneously. I watched Marcus through the bedroom surveillance camera as he prepared for what he didn't know would be the most important meeting of his life. His hands shook as he knotted his tie, and he'd already changed shirts twice. Fear had finally broken through his usual arrogant confidence. He knows he's walking into something dangerous, I observed. Good, Victoria replied, checking her own equipment. Scared people are honest people. He'll ask questions, demand explanations, create exactly the kind of recorded conversations we need for prosecution. At 11 a.m., Marcus received a call that made everyone in our makeshift command center lean forward. Mr. Morrison, there's been a change of plans. The meeting location has moved to the Blackwood Financial offices. Top floor conference room. 2 p.m. As scheduled. Marcus's face went pale. My own office building? Is that a problem, Mr. Morrison? No, of course not. I'll be there. After the call ended, Victoria was already on her radio, coordinating with federal teams positioned around the city. They're moving the meeting to his workplace, she reported. Repeat, target location is now Blackwood Financial, executive floor. Agent Walsh pulled up building schematics on her laptop. That's actually better for us. We know that building, we have sight lines from multiple angles, and if things go wrong, we have more tactical options. If things go wrong. The casual acknowledgement that this operation could turn violent sent a chill through me. What kind of tactical options? I asked. The kind where your husband might not come home tonight, Walsh replied bluntly. Elena, these people have killed federal informants before. If they suspect Marcus is compromised, or if they detect our surveillance. She didn't need to finish the sentence. I understood that I might be watching my husband's final hours, documenting his last conversations before he either went to prison for life or disappeared forever. At 1:30 p.m., Marcus left for his office. Through Victoria's concealed microphone, we could hear his labored breathing as he walked through the Blackwood Financial lobby toward an elevator that would take him to meet some of the most dangerous criminals in the Western Hemisphere. Targets are arriving, Agent Walsh reported, monitoring feeds from surveillance teams positioned around the building. 3 vehicles, multiple occupants, unknown weapons status. On the screens in my dining room, I watched federal agents tracking the movement of cars through downtown traffic. Each vehicle was being followed by unmarked FBI units, each passenger photographed by long-range cameras, each license plate traced through international databases. Vehicle 1, David Kane, identified as lieutenant in the Volkov organization. Previous arrests for money laundering and conspiracy. Vehicle 2, unknown subjects, Eastern European backgrounds based on preliminary analysis. Vehicle 3, technical specialist and security team. The Volkov organization. Even I recognized that name from my federal service, a Russian-Ukrainian criminal network suspected of operating in 15 countries, responsible for billions in laundered money and dozens of murders. Marcus wasn't just meeting with financial criminals. He was walking into a conference room with some of the most dangerous people on earth. At 1:55 p.m., Marcus entered the Blackwood Financial conference room where 3 men in expensive suits waited. Through the audio surveillance, their voices came through clearly. David Kane's American accent, mixed with 2 others speaking English with distinct Eastern European inflections. Mr. Morrison, thank you for accommodating the venue change. We felt it would be beneficial to see your professional environment. Of course, Marcus replied, though his voice carried the strain of someone trying to appear calm while terrified. Please, sit down. We have significant business to discuss. I watched the surveillance feed as Marcus took his seat at the head of his own conference table, surrounded by international criminals who could order his death with a casual word. Mr. Morrison, you're about to become a full partner in our organization. This represents a substantial upgrade in both opportunity and responsibility. Kane opened a briefcase and removed several documents, spreading them across the table where our hidden cameras could record every detail. These are account access codes for our primary operational funds. Approximately $200 million currently available for immediate transfer. Your responsibility will be moving these funds through legitimate financial channels to our designated accounts. That's a substantial responsibility, Marcus said carefully. Indeed. Which is why we need to discuss operational security. Mr. Morrison, have you told anyone about your activities with our organization? The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Through the surveillance feed, I could see Marcus's face struggling to maintain composure. No one. I understand the importance of discretion. Your wife, perhaps? Wives often notice changes in behavior, irregular schedules, unexpected income. My blood ran cold. They were specifically asking about me. My wife has no knowledge of my business activities. She's not particularly observant about financial matters. The casual dismissal of my intelligence stung, but it also probably saved my life. If Marcus had admitted I was a former federal agent, the men in that room would have started making plans to eliminate a potential threat. Good. Because Mr. Morrison, our security protocols are absolute. Anyone who compromises our operations, intentionally or accidentally, is handled permanently. I understand. Do you? Let me be very clear. 2 months ago, we had a partner in Miami who developed a gambling problem. He borrowed against organizational funds without authorization. We found his body in Biscayne Bay. Last month, a technical specialist in the Cayman Islands began asking too many questions about our client base. She experienced a tragic scuba diving accident. They were describing murders as casually as discussing quarterly earnings reports. The point, Mr. Morrison, is that organizational loyalty is not optional. Once you accept full partnership, you become committed to our success permanently. There is no resignation, no early retirement, no change of heart. Do you understand these terms? Through the surveillance camera, I could see Marcus's hands trembling slightly as he nodded. I understand. Excellent. Then let's discuss your new responsibilities. For the next hour, I listened as the organization's leadership outlined a money laundering operation that dwarfed anything I'd investigated during my federal service. Hundreds of millions of dollars flowing through dozens of countries, supported by corrupt officials, violent enforcers, and a network of financial professionals who'd traded their integrity for wealth. Marcus was being given access codes to accounts in 12 different countries. He would coordinate transfers totaling over $50 million per month. In exchange, he would receive a percentage that would make him extraordinarily wealthy, and permanently committed to protecting an organization that murdered anyone who threatened them. Mr. Morrison, we're also expanding your personal security arrangements. You'll be assigned a protection detail, effective immediately. Is that necessary? Mr. Morrison, you're about to become responsible for moving $500 million annually. That level of operational involvement requires appropriate security measures. Also, protection details serve multiple purposes. They protect assets, and they ensure asset loyalty. Asset loyalty. Marcus was being told he would be watched constantly, ostensibly for his protection but actually to ensure he couldn't betray the organization without being killed first. Your protection detail will begin tomorrow. 2 specialists will integrate into your daily routine. They'll be introduced as business consultants from our Caribbean operations. At 4:15 p.m., the meeting concluded with Marcus accepting full partnership in an organization he now knew murdered people who crossed them. Through the surveillance feed, I watched him sign documents that committed him to criminal activities he understood could result in his own death if he ever tried to withdraw. Mr. Morrison, welcome to the organization. Your first major transfer is scheduled for Thursday. $75 million from Cayman accounts to Swiss banking institutions. Details will be provided tomorrow morning. After the criminals left, Marcus remained alone in the conference room for nearly 20 minutes. Through the hidden camera, I could see him staring at the documents they'd left behind, probably contemplating the magnitude of what he'd committed to. Finally, he gathered the papers and locked them in his office safe. Unaware that federal surveillance had recorded every page, every signature, every incriminating detail that would eventually be used to prosecute him for conspiracy, money laundering, and participation in a racketeering enterprise. Back in our dining room command center, Agent Walsh was coordinating with federal teams across the globe. We have positive identification on all 3 subjects. Arrest warrants are being prepared for conspiracy, racketeering, and money laundering. International coordination is proceeding for simultaneous arrests in 6 countries. When do we move? Victoria asked. Thursday morning. Marcus performs the $75 million transfer, which gives us documented evidence of major money laundering. Then, we arrest everyone simultaneously before they can scatter or eliminate evidence. What about Marcus's protection detail? I asked. Walsh smiled grimly. They're federal agents. Have been for 3 months. The organization thinks they're assigning watchers to ensure Marcus's loyalty. Actually, they're providing us with 24-hour surveillance of their new partner's activities. The elegant beauty of the federal operation was breathtaking. Every security measure the organization implemented to protect itself was actually providing law enforcement with deeper access to their activities. When Marcus came home that evening, he looked like a man who'd signed his own death warrant, which, in many ways, he had. He'd committed himself to working with killers for money, fully understanding the consequences of betrayal. How was your day? I asked, playing the role of the oblivious wife for what would be the last time. Productive, Marcus replied, though his voice carried none of its usual confidence. Very productive. There may be some changes coming at work. Good changes? Profitable changes. Probably very profitable. He disappeared into his study to make phone calls that would be his final acts as a free man. Through the surveillance system, I listened as he contacted offshore banks, verified account access, and confirmed his readiness to launder $75 million. In criminal proceeds, each call was being recorded. Each account number traced. Each conversation documented for the prosecution that would ensure Marcus spent the rest of his life in federal prison. Tomorrow would bring his protection detail, federal agents who would document his final day of freedom. Thursday would bring the money transfer that would complete his transformation from embezzler to major criminal. And Thursday evening would bring federal agents to our door with arrest warrants that would end our marriage and Marcus's freedom. Permanently. As I watched my husband through surveillance cameras, preparing for a criminal career he believed would make him wealthy, I thought about my grandmother's jewelry burning in our backyard. About my wedding dress reduced to ashes while I lay unconscious in a hospital bed. About 8 years of marriage. To a man who'd seen my life's memories as disposable clutter, Marcus had burned my past while I was helpless to stop him. Now I was about to burn his future while he was powerless to prevent it. The difference was that his destruction would be permanent, public, and absolutely justified. 2 more days until Marcus Blackwood Morrison discovered that some fires consume everything they touch, including the people who think they're immune to consequences. I could hardly wait to watch him burn. Thursday morning dawned with the crisp clarity of Judgment Day. I woke before Marcus, watching him sleep peacefully beside me, perhaps the last peaceful sleep he would ever have. In 6 hours, he would perform a $75 million money transfer that would complete his transformation from embezzler to international criminal. In 12 hours, he would be in federal custody facing charges that would ensure he never saw freedom again. At 7 a.m., Marcus's new protection detail arrived. 2 men in expensive suits, introduced as Kevin Walsh and Miguel Santos from Caribbean Business Consulting. They carried themselves with the professional confidence of experienced bodyguards, and Marcus never suspected they were FBI agents assigned to document his every move. "Mr. Morrison," Kevin said, settling into our living room like he owned it, "we'll be coordinating your security arrangements from now on. Today is particularly important, given the significance of your first major transaction." "I appreciate the precautions," Marcus replied, though I could see the anxiety in his posture. Having armed men in our house, even ones assigned to protect him, reinforced the dangerous reality of his new criminal career. Miguel produced a secure phone and handed it to Marcus. "All communications regarding today's transfer should use this device. Your personal phones are no longer secure for organizational business." What they didn't tell Marcus was that every call on that phone would be recorded by federal surveillance teams. The FBI was providing him with the rope to hang himself while he believed they were protecting his communications. At 9 a.m., I received a text from Victoria: "Phase final begins now. Stay safe. This will be over soon." Through the surveillance monitors in my study, I watched as Marcus's ordinary Tuesday transformed into the most significant day in the federal government's fight against international organized crime. Teams were positioned across 6 countries, ready to simultaneously arrest dozens of criminals who'd believed their wealth and violence made them untouchable. At 10:30 a.m., Marcus received the call that would seal his fate. "Mr. Morrison, this is David Kane. Are you prepared for today's transaction?" "Yes, all accounts are verified and accessible." "Excellent. The transfer amount is $75 million from Cayman Trust account 847392 to Swiss Banking Corporation account 9384758. Confirmation codes will be provided once the transfer is initiated." "Understood. Mr. Morrison, this transaction will establish your credibility as a full operational partner. Success today leads to significantly larger responsibilities and compensation. I won't disappoint you." Through the FBI surveillance network, I watched as financial crimes units in 3 countries monitored the accounts Marcus would access. The moment he initiated the transfer, every regulatory agency in the Western Hemisphere would have documented proof of his participation in money laundering on an industrial scale. At 11:45 a.m., Marcus left for his office with Kevin and Miguel, flanking him like the professional protection detail they appeared to be. I watched through traffic cameras as their vehicle moved through downtown, followed discreetly by federal surveillance teams that would document every moment of Marcus's final acts as a free man. Target arriving at Blackwood Financial, Agent Walsh reported through my secure communications system. All teams in position. In Marcus's office, surrounded by the awards and certificates that testified to his legitimate professional success, he accessed the computer systems that would destroy His life forever. Through hidden cameras, I watched him enter security codes that gave him access to $75 million in stolen money. At 12:15 p.m., Marcus initiated the transfer. On my monitoring screens, I could see federal agents in multiple countries tracking the money as it moved through the international banking system. Every routing number, every account code, every authentication step was being documented as evidence of systematic money laundering. Transfer initiated, Marcus reported to David Kane. Funds are moving through the clearing system now. Excellent work, Mr. Morrison. Confirmation should arrive within 30 minutes. What Marcus didn't know was that the Swiss account he was transferring money to was controlled by federal authorities. Every dollar would be seized the moment it arrived, and every transaction detail would be preserved as evidence for his prosecution. At 12:47 p.m., the transfer completed successfully. $75 million in criminal proceeds had moved from Cayman Islands accounts to Swiss banks, with Marcus's fingerprints on every aspect of the transaction. Mr. Morrison, Kane's voice carried satisfaction through the recorded phone call. Congratulations. You've just completed your first major operational success. The organization is very pleased. Thank you. I'm committed to continued success. And we're committed to ensuring that success is properly rewarded and protected. At 1:15 p.m., Agent Walsh's voice crackled through my communications system. All teams, execute phase final. Repeat, execute phase final. Simultaneously, in 6 countries across 3 continents, federal agents and international law enforcement moved against the criminal organization that had believed its wealth and violence made it untouchable. The coordination was breathtaking, offices raided, accounts frozen, suspects arrested, evidence seized. In Marcus's office, Kevin and Miguel suddenly produced FBI badges and weapons. Marcus Blackwood Morrison, Kevin announced, you're under arrest for conspiracy, money laundering, racketeering, and violation of federal banking laws. Through the surveillance camera, I watched my husband's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and finally, devastating comprehension. The protection detail assigned to ensure his loyalty had actually been documenting his crimes. You have the right to remain silent, Miguel continued as Kevin secured handcuffs around Marcus's wrists. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Marcus's legs gave out, and he collapsed into his expensive executive chair as the reality of his situation became clear. The successful businessman who'd burned my belongings while I was hospitalized was now a federal defendant facing life imprisonment. The money transfer, Marcus began, was documented by federal authorities in real time, Kevin interrupted. Every keystroke, every authorization code, every communication with your criminal associates. You've provided us with enough evidence to prosecute successfully on all charges. At 2:30 p.m., Marcus was escorted in handcuffs through the Blackwood financial lobby where his colleagues watched in stunned silence. The respected senior vice president was being arrested by federal agents for crimes that would dominate headlines for weeks. Victoria arrived at my house 30 minutes later, her FBI credentials now openly displayed. It's over, she said simply. 19 arrests across 6 countries. Over $300 million in assets seized. The largest money laundering network in the Western Hemisphere has been completely dismantled. And Marcus? Facing federal charges that carry a mandatory minimum of 25 years. With his cooperation in documenting the organization's activities, he might reduce that to 15 years. Without cooperation, he'll die in federal prison. I thought about Marcus's casual dismissal of my destroyed belongings, his assumption that I was too naive to understand his business activities, his willingness to work with killers for money. He won't cooperate, I said. Marcus has never admitted wrongdoing in his life. His arrogance won't let him accept responsibility, even to reduce his sentence. Victoria nodded. That's what our psychological profile suggested. Which means he'll serve the maximum sentence on all charges. At 4 p.m., I drove to the federal courthouse where Marcus was being processed. Through courthouse security cameras that Victoria's team accessed for me, I watched my husband, still in his expensive suit but now wearing handcuffs and leg shackles, being fingerprinted and photographed like any common criminal, the man who'd Mocked my unemployment while secretly stealing millions was now wearing federal prisoner identification numbers. At his arraignment hearing, Marcus stood before a federal judge as prosecutors outlined charges that carried potential sentences totaling 60 years in federal prison. The evidence was overwhelming: recorded conversations, documented money transfers, authenticated communications with known criminals. Marcus's expensive defense attorney requested bail, citing his ties to the community and lack of flight risk. "Your Honor," the federal prosecutor responded, "the defendant has documented access to millions of dollars in offshore accounts, demonstrated willingness to work with violent international criminals, and intimate knowledge of money laundering networks across 6 countries. He represents an extreme flight risk and a potential danger to witnesses." Bail was denied. Marcus would remain in federal custody until trial, and with the documented evidence against him, trial would be a formality. That evening, I sat in our living room, my living room now, surrounded by the silence Marcus's absence created. The surveillance equipment had been removed, the federal agents had departed, and for the first time in weeks, I was truly alone. My phone buzzed with a news alert: FBI dismantles international money laundering network, local executive among 19 arrested. Marcus's mugshot accompanied the article, transforming him from respected businessman to public criminal. I walked out to our backyard, where the ashes of my destroyed belongings still stained the patio stones. My grandmother's jewelry, my wedding dress, my father's letters, all reduced to residue that no amount of money could restore. But Marcus's destruction was different. His career was finished permanently. His professional reputation was destroyed beyond repair. His freedom was gone for decades, possibly forever. His arrogance had been replaced by the reality of federal prison, where money and status meant nothing. 6 months later, I attended Marcus's sentencing hearing. He'd refused all plea bargain offers, maintained his innocence despite overwhelming evidence, and forced prosecutors to present every detail of his crimes at trial. "Marcus Blackwood Morrison," the federal judge announced, "you have been found guilty on all counts. The evidence presented demonstrates systematic criminal activity spanning multiple years and involving hundreds of millions of dollars in stolen funds." Marcus stood in his orange prison jumpsuit, the expensive suits replaced by standard federal inmate clothing. "Your crimes have destroyed the retirement savings of hundreds of innocent people. You've participated in an organization responsible for violence and murder. You've shown no remorse, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and no cooperation with authorities seeking to recover stolen funds." The judge paused, reviewing the sentencing guidelines. "I hereby sentence you to 42 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. You will serve this sentence at a maximum security facility appropriate for white-collar criminals who pose ongoing threats to society." 42 years. Marcus was 51 years old. He would be 93 when released. If he lived that long. As marshals led Marcus away to begin his sentence, our eyes met briefly across the courtroom. In his face, I saw the final death of the arrogance that had convinced him he could burn my life without consequences. A year later, I testified before Congress about financial crimes and the importance of investigating seemingly legitimate professionals who might be hiding criminal activities. My experience as both an FBI agent and a victim had provided unique insights into how criminals operated and how law enforcement could more effectively detect and prosecute financial fraud. The house Marcus and I had shared was sold, with proceeds going to a victim compensation fund for people who'd lost money to his schemes. I bought a smaller place across town, closer to the consulting firm I'd started to help law enforcement agencies investigate complex financial crimes. Detective Weiss closed her investigation into the illegal burning of my belongings. Marcus's federal conviction had rendered state charges redundant. But she sent me a letter noting that my cooperation had helped expose crimes that affected hundreds of victims. 3 years after Marcus's arrest, I received a letter from him at the federal penitentiary. He was requesting my help in appealing his conviction, claiming that his rights had been violated during the investigation. I read the letter once, noting that he still refused to acknowledge his crimes or apologize for destroying my belongings. Then I filed it in the same place he'd filed my memories. I burned it to ash and scattered the remains in my garden. Some fires, I'd learned, serve justice. Others serve vengeance. The best fires serve both, burning away everything that deserves Destruction while creating space for something better to grow. Marcus had taught me that when he burned my past while I was helpless in a hospital bed, that I'd return the lesson by burning his future while he was powerless to prevent it. The difference was that my belongings had been innocent memories, destroyed by cruelty and arrogance. Marcus's freedom had been forfeit the moment he chose to work with killers for money, destroyed by justice and his own criminal choices. In the end, we'd both learned that some things, once burned, can never be restored. But unlike my grandmother's jewelry, Marcus's punishment was exactly what he deserved. The end. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.